Tesla is the car brand of the moment, and for good reason. Introduced in Malaysia in the middle of last year, its electric vehicles offer an all-round package that no other brand seems to be able to provide. A fantastic blend of performance, practicality, range, technology, and access to the supercharger network. Hafiz has already driven the new Model 3, but we've finally gotten access to the Model Y, the SUV. And this is the performance, the fast one. In this review, we're going to answer 3 questions. Number 1, does the Model Y provide enough of an edge in terms of practicality to justify the slight price difference over the Model 3? Number 2, are you losing out by going with an older car rather than the Model 3 Highland? And most importantly, is this performance model with its sub 4 second 0 to 100 time worth the extra money? Let's go find out. First, a bit of housekeeping. If you've ordered your Tesla Model Y, you're going to have to wait a bit more because deliveries are only due to start in April. That's a slight delay from the Q1 timeline Tesla Malaysia promised during the launch last year. Here are the basics. The Model Y starts at 199,000 ringgit for the rear-wheel drive model, but that does not include the order fee, number plate fee, and other charges. Once you add that up, you're looking at paying 200,700 ringgit, and that still does not include registration fees. The long-range dual-motor model costs 247,700 ringgit, but the one we have here is the performance model, and that's priced at 289,700 ringgit. And that's just the start. If you want any other color than white, including this solid black, that's going to cost you 5,000 ringgit, and if you want red, that's 10,000 ringgit. The white interior is another 5,000 ringgit, enhanced autopilot is 16,000 ringgit, and the so-called full self-driving feature, which doesn't even work in Malaysia right now, that's 32,000 ringgit. Madness. And all that money buys you a car that looks practically identical to every other grey market Model Y on the road. Us Malaysians got first dibs with the Model 3 Highland. So if you see one on the road, you know that's an official car. But with the Model Y, Tesla Malaysia is late to its own game. And what you have is a car that still wears the old Tesla design language. So you have this frog face, a very simple rear end design, and this sort of hunchback roofline. And the only real way that you can tell that you bought the performance model is the carbon fiber rear spoiler and these 21-inch turbine alloy wheels, which are black. So you can't really see them. I just think it's a really lazy design. It feels like Tesla started off with a pre-facelift Model 3, gave it a hatchback, some extra ground clearance, and then just pulled the roof upwards a little bit. And in the process, you lose all the sleekness of the Model 3, especially the Highland version. Now, I know that some of you think that Teslas look very cool, that they're very clean, very minimalist, and so unlike every other car on the road right now. And I have to admit, this black on black color scheme does look pretty slick. But I want you to put all of that aside, look at this car with your own 2 eyes and understand just how ugly it is. Ugh. Inside is where the Model Y starts to become good. Okay, so you do lose out on some of the Model 3 Highland's quality improvements, but that also means you get the stuff that was thrown out, like stalks. And overall, this is still a nice place to be. The first thing that strikes you when you're sitting in the Model Y is just how spacious it feels. And I'm not talking about boring things like headroom or legroom, which are of course excellent. You see, the side windows are quite upright. There's none of what designers call tumble-home, you know, when the side windows are slanted like this. And as a result, this car feels ridiculously airy. It's like driving around in a fishbowl. All of this glass is a double-edged sword, of course. All Model Ys come with a glass roof, but there's no built-in sunshade. And even though there's quite a strong tint on it, if you park this car under a hot sun, be prepared to have your hands and bum burnt touching all of this hot leather. You can buy a sunshade through Tesla itself, but it's one of those cheap folding things. You know, like the ones your mom used to have in her car. And it also means spending more money for something that should have come in the car in the first place. But the star of the show is, of course, this 15-inch touchscreen. By now you know that this screen houses all of the car's functions, such as the speed readout, the aircon controls, and even the steering wheel adjustment. You know how BMW and Mercedes are starting to do this now? You have Tesla to blame for that. And I really don't know how I feel about that. So yeah, you adjust the steering wheel and the mirrors using the touchscreen and the controls on the steering wheel. And yes, Hafiz says this is something that you set up once and then forget about it. And that's true if you're the only one driving, or if you're sharing this car with, say, your wife. You'll have to go into the touchscreen every time it's your turn to drive the car. I know you can set up separate driver profiles with different settings, but still, what are we doing here, guys? Then there are the aircon controls. Yes, you can adjust the temperature right here, but having to go into the menu to adjust the fan speed and even where the vents are pointing at in a car that's already burning hot because of all this glass? Someone wasn't thinking. But the navigation system is excellent. It uses Google Maps data so you can search for any location like you can on your phone, and there's traffic information as well so you get accurate travel times. Plus, all of the settings are in a logical place. They're not strewn about everywhere in the infotainment system. BMW, I'm looking at you, and if you're parked up or charging, you can watch Netflix or play games on it. It just feels like the people who designed the system have lived with it before putting it out in the real world, which is nice. Elsewhere, the seats have been designed for fat Americans, so you don't get lots of lateral support. But the high driving position does at least give you a good view out. The build quality is also actually pretty good. You get soft touch materials on the dashboard and the door cards, and some nice leather on the grab handle and the center console. Also, the wood trim looks and feels convincingly like wood, even if it's the kind you often see on cheap IKEA furniture. There are some faults. This panel gap between the dashboard and door cards is so big I can stick a finger in it. Then there's the header rail, which sounds a bit hollow when you knock on it, and the glove box, which opens so loudly it sounds like a gunshot. But other than that, it's fine. You also get lots of storage spaces like these dual wireless chargers. Since I don't work at that company anymore, I no longer rock two phones, but trust me, there are actually two wireless chargers here. There's also a storage space under here, which is big, and it also houses two USB-C ports. There is a compromise, however, and that is that the armrest control box in here is a bit small. Back here is where the Model Y truly earns its keep. It's massive with loads of headroom, even with this sloping roofline. Legroom is also pretty good, as you can see. But the best part about it is that because the front seats are mounted so high up, there's this great big cavern for you to slide your feet underneath. It's amazing. Even the middle seats are pretty good to sit in as well, because this center console is scalloped down here. And you get your own aircon vents and two USB-C ports. The flat rear bench doesn't provide much in the way of under-thigh support, and you don't get the fancy rear screen that you have on the Model 3 Highland, but those are my only two real complaints. Open the tailgate, bearing in mind that there's no hands-free opening function, and you get a huge boot. The official figure is 854 liters, but that's loaded all the way up to the roof. But even taking that into consideration, there's still loads of space for you to store all your luggage and stuff. And if you've pulled those two levers on the side, you can fold down the rear seats to get a whopping 2,041 liters. There is one problem, however. For whatever reason, Tesla has removed the parcel shelf this year. The car comes as standard with heavily tinted privacy glass, but if you look closely, you can still see your stuff, which is not great. Happily, however, there is a large storage space underneath this boot floor for you to keep your stuff hidden. It's almost like a second boot in here. And at the front, you get another 117-liter front boot, which is bigger than practically every other EV on the market right now. Before we go for a drive, I want to talk to you about the key. This is the key. It's an NFC card, and to unlock the car, you have to tap it on the B pillar right here. Now, this obviously doesn't have a battery or buttons on it, so you can't open the front or rear boots. And because this doesn't have a transponder, you have to place it on a specific spot on the center console to start the car. Tesla obviously wants you to move to the app, which has all of those features, and that's great. But because this isn't our car, we can't add it to our app, so we can't show you any of those features. This also means that every time we want to open the boot, we have to unlock the car first by tapping on the B pillar. And you can't open the front boot unless you go into the touchscreen, which is not great. What is pretty great is this door handle, which opens backwards compared to every other car with flush door handles. That is actually quite a good design because it gives you more leverage for you to open the door. That's some smart thinking. So far, the Model Y is a bit of a mixed bag. So what's it like on the road? Well, I can tell you one thing. This model is called the Performance, and yep, you get performance. Tesla doesn't actually say how much power this thing makes, but reports suggest that the dual motors produce 456 horsepower and 674 Nm of torque. The curb weight is also relatively low for an EV, at just under 2 tons. All this performance is not actually that easy to access. In the normal chill mode, there's very little to suggest that this is anything other than a relaxed, fairly slow EV. You have to put it into sport mode and then all hell breaks loose. Make no mistake, the Model Y performance is fast. It gets from 0 to 100 km per hour in 3.7 seconds, and it will keep on going to its top speed of 250 km per hour. There's no drama, no fuss. You simply think of the speed you want to get up to and the car will just get there in no time at all. You can forget about the Volvo C40 or the smart #1 rubbers. This car is faster than all those things. It's not quite as fast as a Porsche Taycan Turbo or an Audi RS e-tron GT, but it's not a million miles away. And don't forget, this thing costs a fraction of those cars. But what about the handling? The Model Y performance gets bigger wheels, bigger brakes, and lower, stiffer suspension. You also get a track mode that lets you adjust the torque distribution and regen braking to your liking, including a drift setting that will let you pull those sweet donuts, no problem at all. All these changes are great and all, but the Model Y performance is still not a driver's car. Yes, it may be lowered and have a low center of gravity thanks to all the batteries under the floor, but this is still a tall and heavy car, and in the corners, you definitely feel it. There is quite a bit of body roll, and over mid-corner bumps, the car does bounce around a little bit. With all-wheel drive and these Pirelli P0 tires, there's loads of grip, but push it to its limits, and it's the front that breaks traction first, and the car simply understeers. But the biggest problem I have is the steering. Yes, it's very quick, so the car feels agile, but it's also very numb. You don't get a sense of what the front wheels are doing. It's also uniformly quick throughout. There's no build-up in terms of speed or weighting as you turn the steering wheel, and as a result, it's actually quite difficult for you to judge the turning force you need to get a car to move a certain way. Quite often you end up turning too much and you have to correct it, so it's not the easiest car to drive smoothly. There's something else as well. This car feels heavy to drive, and I don't mean that it's heavy. Both the throttle and brake pedals are very firm, and together with the strong regen braking, it feels like there's a lot of inertia for you to fight through. You also can't change the regen braking unless you're in track mode. There are 3 settings for the brakes, but that's only when you're coming to a stop. The performance upgrades also hurt the Model Y when you're driving slowly. To be honest, this ride is a bit firm, especially at lower speeds. It does get better the faster you go, and there is a level of compliance and body control that make it feel a bit more comfortable. Still, it might be a bit too stiff for daily driving, especially for a family SUV. Thankfully, the Model Y is very quiet. This car is fitted with front and rear double glazed windows, first seen on the Model 3 Highland, and as such, you barely hear any wind noise at all. There is, however, a bit of road noise at highway speeds, coming from the fat tires. I suspect part of it is down to the lack of a parcel shelf, which creates a resonance that amplifies some of the noise, but it's really not too bad. The level of performance on offer does also compromise the efficiency of this car. Officially, the Model Y performance has a range of 514 kilometers on the WLTP cycle, but that seems a bit optimistic. So far, we've been averaging around 18.5 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers in daily driving, and that includes a little bit of performance driving. Couple that with a battery size of around 80 kilowatt hours, and you're looking at a real-world range of around 430 kilometers, which is still pretty good for something that's this fast. And if you need even more range, the car has a tool to help you with that. Now, most electric vehicles only show you your range, your battery percentage, and your energy consumption. But look at this. If you open the Energy app, it will show you how much projected range you consumed versus how far you actually drove. It says here that I used 16.2 kilometers, and that's 8.3 kilometers more than what the car projected at the beginning. And it will show you the breakdown of what actually used up all that electricity, like your driving, your climate control usage, your battery conditioning, and even elevation changes. And it will even show you tips for you to improve your range. It says here, brake pedal use costs 1.2 kilometers. Use regenerative braking when appropriate to improve efficiency. And staying below 110 kilometers per hour would have saved 0.8 kilometers this trip. It will even tell you if there's a headwind that's been costing you range. It's a really good idea. Now let's talk charging. Tesla doesn't provide much in the way of charge times, but it does say that its 250 kilowatt DC superchargers are able to provide 261 kilometers of range in just 15 minutes. The Model Y still uses a 400 volt architecture, so it can't hold that much power for that long, but it's still fast enough for most users. The best part about using a supercharger is that you don't have to faff about with an app or a credit card. All you have to do is to plug the charger into the car and it will charge automatically. That's very neat. Unfortunately, the Tesla Model Y only supports up to 11 kilowatts of AC charging power, so expect the full charge to take all night. Now for the bad news. Tesla's supercharger network in Malaysia isn't quite as extensive as you might hope. Aside from the one at the Tesla Center in Cyberjaya, you have chargers in Pavilion KL, Sunway Pyramid, Freeport A Famosa in Malacca, and Sunway Big Box in Iskandar Putri. Those are all malls, which are basically the worst places to put a DC fast charger because you're in and out so quickly. And when you're at a mall, you'll want to actually spend some time there. Tesla's AC destination chargers probably make more sense at those locations. Perhaps next time Tesla will consider putting superchargers in places where you don't actually want to spend so much time, such as highway rest stops. We'll see when Tesla builds out its network in the future. At the very least, the superchargers will be just as reliable as they are everywhere else in the world. Now we come to the most annoying part of driving this Model Y, and that's the Autopilot. To be fair, this is actually a very capable system. It works well in traffic, can anticipate if a car is cutting into your lane, and it can take fairly sharp highway curves without much trouble. My problem with Autopilot is that it's a bit heavy-handed. It wants to do everything by itself. And it's not perfect. It sometimes veers out of its lane, and it doesn't give enough space for big lorries and motorcycles. In those instances, your natural instinct is to take over. And the second you do that, Autopilot doesn't just hand you the reins a little bit, it disengages completely. It can take you a bit by surprise, and it can actually be a bit dangerous, especially if you don't notice that it's disengaged. Also, this particular unit doesn't come with enhanced autopilot, so it doesn't make lane changes for you. You'll have to do them yourself, and every time you use the indicators, guess what? Autopilot disengages. So you'll have to re-engage it again by pulling on the gear selector twice, and that can get very annoying very quickly. To answer the questions at the start of this video, the Model Y is a very practical car. It's very roomy inside, you get a nice commanding driving position, and the front and rear boots are huge. So yes, if you need something bigger than a Model 3, or if you just want the ease of use of an SUV compared to a sedan, then the Model Y certainly is the right car for you, especially when it's not that much more expensive. And yes, the performance model is very fast, and the chassis upgrades do make this a much nicer car to drive, even though it is still by no means a sports car. There will be people who just want the best, the fastest Tesla there is. And if you are one of those people, then the performance model is surprisingly good value. But should you get this car right now? I'm not so sure. The Model 3 Highland is a much nicer looking car, and lack of stocks aside, the improvements do make for a better car. And we know that a facelift, codenamed Project Juniper, is coming. We don't know when it's coming, but when it does, you'll be kicking yourself for not waiting for it. And there's something else. Living with this car, there's no sense of fun, no joy. You're left in awe with what it can do, and you can even learn to love it, but it never really gets under your skin. The problem with this car is that there's no real character. And I'm sorry, but putting a fart cushion simulator on this car, or drizzling with juvenile Elon Musk humor, doesn't give it character. This car, it's a bit like an iPhone. It's very fast, brilliantly capable, has great battery life, and is full of thoughtful features that make your life just that little bit easier. Hell, I have an iPhone, but an iPhone is a bit boring. It's not for everyone. And neither is a Tesla. Don't get me wrong, the Tesla Model Y Performance is a fantastic electric car, and I would happily recommend it to anyone who wants to buy one. It's just not my kind of electric car. So that's our review of the Tesla Model Y Performance. What do you think of this car? And do you agree with what I said? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching and stay safe, everyone.